Hi, I'm Tamo, and today I'm going to show you how I managed to fit an Ikea kitchen into a small room using one-point perspective. First, I draw the wall of the room where I want to place the kitchen. I do this to scale, using a ruler, where 3 centimeters represent 1 meter. The total width of my wall is 3.6 meters. On the ruler, this measures 10.8 centimeters, which means the drawing is scaled down by a factor of 33.33 compared to the real size. Once I have marked the width of the wall, I draw the height of the wall and also mark its location. Once the height is set, I measure and draw the top line. Just as I measured the bottom line to 10.8 centimeters, I do the same for the top line and then draw it to the exact length. Once both the top and bottom lines are in place, I connect their ends with straight vertical lines. This gives me an end wall that is exactly the size that matches my room, only 33.33 times smaller. Now that the corner lines of the end wall are drawn, I mark the position of the door. The doorway is 1 meter wide and 2.1 meters high. It's actually a pretty wide doorway, which is a good thing. Even a larger refrigerator can fit inside. To make everything clearer, I label the wall dimensions on the drawing. The narrow wall next to the door is 0.6 meters wide, the door opening is 1 meter wide, and the wall where the cabinets will be installed is 1.9 meters wide. The total wall height is 2.6 meters. To continue drawing one-point perspective, I'll place the vanishing point at about eye level of a standing person. This point is very important because all the lines pointing from it will naturally make the drawing three-dimensional. First, I draw the lines where the walls meet the floor and the ceiling, and I draw them toward the vanishing point. When I draw the cabinets, I also draw them to scale. To create depth, I draw the sidelines towards the vanishing point. The width of the wall to the doorway is 1.9 meters and the total length of the kitchen cabinets is 1.83 meters, so this layout is perfect. There is still 7 centimeters of free space next to the door, which is the perfect place for a switch. On the end wall, I can measure the width of the cabinet worktop and the depth of the side cabinets. From there, I draw lines directed toward the vanishing point, which makes the view naturally appear larger toward the viewer. The width of the corner kitchen cabinets in the other direction is 1.22 meters. I measure this along the side wall of the room, but since that wall is drawn in perspective, the measurement won't appear perfectly accurate. That's why I also rely on the visual impression. Each cabinet that comes closer to the viewer needs to appear slightly larger. All lines that extend away from the end wall, that is, lines parallel to the side walls, must be directed toward the vanishing point. To do this, one end of the ruler must always be placed exactly on the vanishing point. If the ruler is even slightly off, the perspective will look unnatural. With the lower cabinets roughly in place according to their dimensions, it's time to draw the upper cabinets as well. For the upper cabinets, I set the height to 50 centimeters. First, I drew the bottom line of the upper row of cabinets, and then the top. As before, I also drew the upper cabinets to scale. I measured their dimensions relative to the back wall of the cabinet and the end wall of the kitchen. I drew the sides of the cabinets towards the vanishing point. The depth of the upper cabinets is half the depth of the lower cabinets, and I mark this on the drawing. Only after drawing the back panels of the cabinets do I measure the width of each cabinet. I mark the measurement on the back wall and then project it onto the front using lines pointing towards the vanishing point. This gives the cabinets a natural width, just as a person would see them. I recommend drawing all the lines very lightly, as this makes it easier to erase unnecessary lines later. At first, the cabinets will be transparent, but this method allows us to draw everything exactly to scale. I draw the range hood between the 2 cabinets, which is usually deeper than the wall cabinets. I determine its depth based on the cabinet side measurements, making sure it's visually clear that it extends beyond the cabinet fronts. I designed a simple range hood that fits well with the clean and minimal style of this kitchen. I can draw the upper cabinet doors with darker lines because there is nothing in front of them. The lower cabinets are a different story. Since it is a small space, I need to place the dining table in front of the kitchen cabinets. For this reason, I keep the lower cabinets lightly drawn so that it is easier to erase unnecessary lines later. I draw the dining table lower than the kitchen counter, because the standard height of a dining table is lower. If I were to make the table the same height as the countertop, I would have to use taller chairs, and from experience, taller chairs are simply not as comfortable. Let's draw a reasonably sized dining table and add a couple of stools underneath it. At first, the table remains transparent, but I'll erase the unnecessary lines later. Stools take up less space and can easily be tucked under the table when needed. I add soft cushions on top to make them more comfortable to sit on, although I'm not completely sure yet what kind of chairs I'll choose in the end. Let's draw a table in a typical Ikea style, although I'm not completely sure yet if that's the one I'll actually choose for this space. I really like foldable tables, especially in a small room. They're very practical and save a lot of space. I draw a narrow hob, typical of a small kitchen, and place the oven under it. At first I considered placing the oven somewhere else, for example in a cupboard next to it, but visually it didn't look right. In addition, if the oven door is opened while cooking, hot steam can escape. It makes more sense for this heat and steam to rise towards the extractor fan above the hob. I draw a simple oven with 2 large knobs and a clock in the middle, and add a wide handle. I draw a glass window under the handle so you can see inside the oven. I have made the hob dark, so I also darken the oven. This makes them more visible in the drawing. The oven is so dark that the knobs are no longer visible, so I draw them with stronger lines to make them stand out better. To avoid empty space under the oven, I need to buy a separate drawer from Ikea to fit in there. Luckily, they sell separate drawers. Let's say the basic elements of the kitchen are now drawn. I'll draw the cabinet doors darker and add handles to make them stand out. Oh, the sink is still missing. We'll add that along with the faucet. From here, I'll finish the kitchen with the small details that are usually found in such a space. Sit back and enjoy how the final picture comes together.